Hello and good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you back to episode 82 of Album Rant. And as you can see right in front of you, I am once again going to talk about the godfathers of heavy metal, the one and only British heavy metal artist, Black Sabbath. And tonight I am going to talk about their fourth album, which is appropriately entitled Black Sabbath Volume 4. Now, why is it called Black Sabbath Volume 4? I will get to that, don't you worry. But it's been quite a bit since I've talked about these guys, and I think it's been at least 30 episodes or so, maybe 25, I don't know. But I'm going to kind of want to take the next couple of minutes, bring everybody back up to speed and let you know how we got to where we are right now. And as you probably know, they originated in the late 60s, and the lineup is composed of Ozzy Osbourne on lead vocals, Tony Iommi on lead guitar, Geezer Butler on bass guitar, and Bill Ward on the drums. Now, they have gone through a ton of lineup changes, especially throughout the 80s and the 90s, but during the 70s, they had a very consistent lineup, and they did not suffer or undergo any lineup changes. So, those four guys basically dominated the entire length of the 70s, and that's really quite impressive given the instability that a lot of these members later showed. So, anyways, in 1970, they released their very first album entitled just Black Sabbath. And I've talked about this many times, but this came right off the heels of Led Zeppelin, and they had released their first two albums in 1969, and that really, stepped things up. The world had never really heard something as heavy as Led Zeppelin, and of course, it's not that heavy by today's standards, but again, remember, this is the late 60s. And Sabbath released their very first album shortly after those first two Zeppelin albums, and again, they adopted the sound that had made those first two Zeppelin albums so legendary, and of course, they jacked it up a bit, they got heavier, but another thing about that first Black Sabbath album is it was much, much darker and demonic than anything anyone had ever seen or heard at the time. Now, once again, it's fairly tame by today's standards, but remember, this was the early 70s, and no one had really quite experienced something quite like it. Especially the title track, which was just entitled Black Sabbath. It had a very dark and gloomy medieval intro to it. And again, it was not just heavy music, it was scary music. And there were plenty of other very legendary songs off that initial LP. We had The Wizard. We had Behind the Wall of Sleep. We had NIB. We had Wicked World and a cover of Ainsley Dunbar's Warning, which included a guitar solo called Bit of Finger, and it was a great guitar solo. Right up there with Jimmy Page's guitar solo in Heartbreaker. And so after that first album came out, they released a second one later that year entitled Paranoid. And I have reviewed that one before on Album Rant, so I won't talk about it too much, but just go over some of the highlights. We had War Pigs, one of the greatest metal songs ever. The title track was very famous. We had Planet Caravan. We had Iron Man. Yes, that Iron Man. I'm kind of sick of it. There was Electric Funeral, Hand of Doom, Rat Salad, which was Bill Ward's Moby Dick, I guess. And then, of course, it ended with Jack the Stripper / Fairies Wear Boots, which was kind of hilarious, actually. So, the following year, in 1971, their third album came out, and it was called Master of Reality. And it was also incredibly iconic, incredibly legendary. And it had the song Sweet Leaf. It had After Forever, Embryo, Children of the Grave, what else? Orchid, Lord of This World, Solitude, and Into the Void. And it was another really great album. But anyways, after that, we now come to the year 1972, and Also, the subject of tonight's review, which is their fourth album, entitled Black Sabbath Volume 4. And again, this is the cover art. It's also incredibly iconic. And this was actually the very first Sabbath album that was not produced by longtime producer Roger Bain, who is also well known for his work with Judas Priest and Budgie, who I have talked about before as well. And instead, this was produced by Patrick Meehan, who was the band's manager at the time. But that's really just in name only. Tony Iommi actually took over the majority of the production, which is quite interesting. Now, Sabbath had established a very heavy sound, even heavier than Zeppelin, which was considered heavy at the time. And Volume 4 continued that, and it upped the ante, and it made the sound even heavier. But having said that, this album did have a ton of experimentation on it, which I will also talk about in a second. So let's see what's inside here. We have a very, very iconic picture right here of the band at one of their shows, and boy, I wish I was there. Unfortunately, I was negative 13 years old at the time. So let's see what's over here. We have the insert. It's got the cover right there, and on the back, we actually have pictures of the band. There's Ozzy right there. There's Tony Iommi right there, the one and only member to appear on every album. Geezer Butler is there, and Bill Ward is there on the drums. So there we have that. Let's get this right back in there. And then over here on the back, we have yet another picture of the cover art. But I'm going to kind of hone in and zoom in right here because this is the track list. So let's go ahead and get underway. Now, I first picked this album up in high school, and before I bought this one, of course it was on CD at the time, I had really only heard the Paranoid album and a greatest hits compilation called We Sold Our Soul for Rock and Roll. And there were a couple of songs from Volume 4 on there, and I'm going to be honest, the songs that were on there I thought were good for the most part, but nothing really gripped me the way I was hoping it to. Well, fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, depending on which way you look at it, they held a lot of the great tracks from Volume 4 off of that compilation, and so I'm really glad that I picked this up in the CD store, because it starts out with Wheels of Confusion / The Straightener, which I'll get to in a second. Now, from the very beginning, Wheels of Confusion just grabs me. It is such a very heavy opener, but it starts out very, very bluesy. And it was not really what I was expecting. It was bluesy, but at the same time, it was very heavy and very electric. But what I kind of actually like about it is that bluesy little intro doesn't last very long. It only lasts about 20 seconds or so, because after that, it goes straight into the main riff. You know, the dong, 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 doo dong, 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 and it just broods along and broods along after that for the next couple of minutes or so. This is pure, unapologetic cocaine music, and I love it very much. Cocaine was the band's drug of choice at this time, and I will talk more about that later, believe me, I will. But Wheels of Confusion, it is just such a very heavy, but at the same time, very mystical and magical number, and you can just feel the cocaine being snorted up their noses as you listen to it. It's just so awesome. But apparently, the lyrics are actually a lot about alienation. It's about, not knowing where you're going in life, just being lost and confused. And it's got a pretty painful message behind it, actually, but at the same time, this is such a powerful song. And Ozzy, man, he gives the song such atmosphere, I'm telling you. And the way he sings it, you can just feel the guy's pain behind it. Ozzy may not have been the most talented vocalist out there, but he really sells it on this one. And we have Long Ago, I wandered through my mind in the land of fairy tales and stories. Lost in happiness, I knew no fears. Innocence and love was all I knew. Was it illusion? And I know, those lyrics are pretty bizarre. They're pretty, out there. But at the same time, it is so awesome. And they struck a very delicate balance between those two aspects, which I love. Now, in the middle, first of all, let me back up. That main riff goes on for 2 verses. There's no real chorus other than "was an illusion" if you count that as a chorus. But in the middle, we have a little bridge, and it starts to pick up a little bit. And we have "lost in the wheels of confusion, running through valleys of tears, eyes full of angry delusion, hiding in everyday fears." And it does pick up a bit, but then after that, it goes right back to the main riff, and we do that riff that I was talking about earlier one more time, and it's just as epic. Now, I said before that there was another part to this called the straightener. Well, this is actually the outro of the song. After about 5.5 minutes or so, it kind of shifts gear and it just goes into this 2-3 minute jam session for a little bit, and it's also really awesome and very heavy. Now, when I say this is heavy metal, just keep in mind this was the 70s, so it's not going to sound like 80s heavy metal, like let's say Judas Priest or Iron Maiden or Metallica. It definitely has a 70s vibe to it, which makes total sense, but it's still just as heavy and just as awesome, okay? Black Sabbath kind of has this thing where if a song is multi-part, they'll give a name to both of the parts. And I talked about this on my Paranoid review, how the outro to War Pigs is called Luke's Wall for some reason. It's kind of weird. But the outro to Wheels of Confusion is called The Straightener, which, whatever. As long as I get to hear it, I guess that's fine. So then we come to the second song called Tomorrow's Dream. And this was the main song that was on that Greatest Hits, We Sold Our Soul for Rock and Roll album that I initially bought by these guys. And this one has kind of a different sound to it. I wouldn't quite say that it's a pop song or anything. It definitely isn't. But the guitar just sounds a little bit more polished than Wheels of Confusion was. And again, I'm all for experimentation. I mean, you gotta test the waters at some point in your life. But having said that, I think this song isn't quite as powerful and as gripping as Wheels of Confusion was, but still, it's really, really great. And it's a little bit slower. Let me back up. It's a little bit, like I said, it's more upbeat, I guess. I wouldn't call it fast, but it definitely broods along a little bit, and I think it is good for what it is. So probably one of the bigger hits from this album, but I really think that Wheels of Confusion was better. Now, I alluded to experimentation earlier, and this is really where the band goes way out in left field. We have Changes, which is a piano ballad. Yes, Sabbath did a piano ballad, and this may be the first instance, or one of the first instances, where you have this band that is considered to be pretty hard rocking, pretty heavy, and they just decide to do an incredibly soft song. Kiss would also do it, Alice Cooper would also do it, Judas Priest even did it, and well, this is Black Sabbath's example of doing it, and boy, this does not work for me. The lyrics are sappy, okay? Ozzy sounds incredibly whiny on this, and I can't believe I'm saying that because the first 2 numbers were so incredibly awesome. But I mean, just listen to some of these lyrics. I feel unhappy, I feel so sad, I've lost the best friend that I ever had. She was my woman, I loved her so, but it's too late now, I've let her go. I'm going through changes, I'm going through changes. And that's the entire chorus right there. Just, I'm going through changes. And if this song had a punch behind it, if this song had some pure raw emotion behind it, I would probably speak a lot more highly of it, even though it is a piano ballad. Again, some piano ballads can work. A very good example is Lady by Styx, which ironically was way heavier than this song. But that one really works because, again, the songwriting I think is stronger. And even then, the band does come in after the first couple of minutes or so. The band never comes in on changes. It's just this kind of bluesy, sappy piano ballad, which I am just so not digging. This was also on We Sold Our Soul for Rock and Roll, and I keep talking about that compilation because that was really my first introduction to this band, And when changes came up, I'm like, wait, this is Black Sabbath? Ooh, I'm not feeling this. And I'm not really feeling the next song either, but fortunately, it's not really much of anything. It's called FX, and it only goes on for about a minute or so. On the previous album, Master of Reality, we had these 2 tracks. They were called Orchid, and what was the other one called? Embryo. And they were very short, and they really just Embryo at least just sounded like sound effects, actually. And that's what FX is. It just sounds like Tony Iommi just kind of messing around with the guitar a little bit, kind of just picking at it and making some sound effects. And I guess it's there for atmosphere. I guess it's there to set the mood, but, it's okay. But again, it's not really, like I said, meant to be taken seriously. Even Iommi himself said it was a total, quote-unquote, total joke. So we have that. But then, fortunately, things pick right back up on track 5, which was Supernaut. And this one really goes back to the sound that was established on Wheels of Confusion, except this one is not brooding, it's not bluesy, it's very fast, and it's also very heavy. And I'm sure you know the riff by this point. And I did the best I could there. I'm not great or anything, but I tried, that's all that really matters. But this was actually considered to be a favorite track of the likes of Frank Zappa and John Bonham, actually. Very impressive, I'll say. And this was often performed live. It was considered to be one of the best songs from Volume 4. And Bill Ward usually had a drum solo, kind of in the middle of it, I guess. Again, I was negative 13 years old when this album came out. I never got to see them live, but that's what I've read, and so I think that's pretty awesome. But, the lyrics are also pretty out there, because again, like I said, this was their big cocaine album. I want to reach out and touch the sky. I want to touch the sun, but I don't need to fly. I'm going to climb up every mountain of the moon and find the dish that ran away with the spoon. Okay, so we have that right there. This song doesn't really have a chorus, actually. It just goes from verse to verse to verse, but I think that's actually pretty great. And like I said, it's very fast and very heavy, and I have no complaints about Supernaut, one of my very favorite Black Sabbath tracks. So that is going to conclude side 1, but what is my favorite from side 1? It is definitely Wheels of Confusion. It was never any question about that one. One of my all-time favorite Black Sabbath numbers, and actually one of my favorite songs of all time, so there's that. So now let's go to side number 2, and we have the song Snowblind. Well, guys, if I go on my iPhone and I go to the music app, which has my entire collection on there, and I go to songs and I search Snowblind, it's actually going to come up quite a bit, because a lot of artists have had songs called Snowblind, such as Ace Frehley and Styx. They all have songs called Snowblind, and they all tackle a very similar subject matter, which, as you've probably guessed by now, is cocaine. This is their big cocaine album, and actually this was going to be the title of the album. Okay, this was going to be just entitled Snowblind. And the band was all for it, but the record company was actually like, no, can't do that. We can't have such an obvious drug reference be the title of the album. Again, it was the 70s, they're a little bit more uptight about things like that, so, it's okay. Black Sabbath Volume 4 will still do it for me, and again, it's just the music I care about, not the name of the album. If you want to call this Snowblind, go right ahead. But this one is a little bit more slow and brooding, which I guess makes sense. And the intro is just like don 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 don, and it never really quite picks up, but that's fine. It can be a slow number. It's also very, very heavy. And again, we have what you get and what you see, things that don't come easily, feeling happy in my vein, icicles within my brain, cocaine. So yeah, there you go. Subtlety is not a thing on this one at all. This would also be covered by Ozzy Osbourne in his solo career, and fun fact, it actually does appear on the album Speak of the Devil, which was released in 1982, and it's a pretty decent version, all things considered. I really think you should check that out if you have not already. So yeah, Snowblind, very heavy. Then we come to Cornucopia. And this one kind of shifts back and forth, and that's actually going to be something we're going to see a lot through the rest of this album. It starts out incredibly doomy. And then after that, we have that little very doomy and dark intro, but then things start to kind of pick up a bit. It gets more upbeat and light. But one thing I kind of like about this song is it keeps switching back between the very doomy segment and the more upbeat segment. So we have two very contrasting segments on this number, and that could be a bad thing, absolutely, but I think it works pretty well, actually. This is usually kind of a throwaway track, but don't throw it away. It's a great song. You definitely need to check it out, have you not already. Although if you're watching this video, you probably have checked it out. Fun fact, Bill Ward actually hates this song, and he just doesn't like some of the segments and patterns within it. And when they were recording it, apparently he felt like he nailed the song completely, but he felt like he was getting bad vibes from everybody else in the room. I guess the record producer and the rest of the band, and they kind of gave him the impression that he dropped the ball on it. And he just kind of left and kind of went off on his own after that to kind of, reflect upon what had just happened. But yeah, because of all that, he really does not like this song. Also, right around this time, he actually almost died. And while most of the band was really into cocaine, drinking was his big thing. And he actually passed out and blacked out from binge drinking. And then apparently the rest of the band decided to play a prank on him where they found a canister of gold paint and sprayed him with it. Kind of like what happened in the James Bond film Goldfinger. Well, just like in that movie, the paint covered up a lot of his pores and caused skin suffocation, and it actually led to him experiencing a seizure. Glad he was all right and everything, but you don't want to mess around, especially if you're high on drugs. That's not a very good idea. So yeah, a little story about that one. But then comes track number 3, or track number 8 in total, called Laguna Sunrise. And this one is an instrumental, just like FX is, but it's a lot better than FX. This one's very, very soft, but it's also got kind of a mystical feel behind it. And apparently, Tony Iommi was out chilling on Laguna Beach, and it's all about the experiences he felt when he would watch the sunrise, and it's pretty good for what it is. I mean, again, it's kind of soft, but Tony Iommi definitely takes the lead on this one, and I think it's pretty good, okay? And it's a great instrumental. It has an orchestra behind it, which can work sometimes, but it can also not work sometimes. But in this case, I do believe it works, so good for them. But yeah, that's Laguna Sunrise. Very soft, mellow instrumental, but it definitely works. Now, we come to the 4th song called Saint Vicious Dance. Did I say that correctly? I really have no idea. If I didn't, I'm sure you'll correct me. But this one starts out very upbeat and almost has a Caribbean vibe to it. Maybe that's not what they intended, but that's what I gleaned from this. And it's been highly compared to the likes of Led Zeppelin. Like, I heard someone say it has a Led Zeppelin feel behind it, which very well could have been the intention. But, again, the first little bit is very upbeat, and I really like it. But again, just like Cornucopia, it keeps switching from one segment to the next. And the two segments are very, very different. One of them, like I said, very lighthearted, very upbeat, and the other one is a little bit more heavy and less upbeat and more dark. This is definitely not one of their darker songs. That segment is dark in comparison to the other one. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty fast. It's also very heavy. I actually like it. when you first listen to it, you might be thinking it's kind of a throwaway track, and, most people do consider it to be a throwaway track, but you gotta keep listening to it because, again, it gets much heavier as the song gets going, and I think it's really good. So then we come to the very last song. It's called Under the Sun / Every Day Comes and Goes. This is one of the longer songs on here. It pushes the 6-minute boundary. Wheels of Confusion was 8 minutes. This is probably the second longest song in here, I want to say. So yeah, but it, again, starts off with a very short, very demonic segment, and it is dark, and it is scary, and it's very brooding and haunting. But it doesn't last very long, just like the intro to Wheels of Confusion, because it then moves into the next segment where things start picking up a bit and getting faster. It's still very dark, it's still very gloomy, but it does start picking up a bit. Now, something I found very interesting, the lyrics to this song. You may or may not know this, but on the previous album, Master of Reality, there is a song called After Forever, and I think the lyrics were written by Geezer Butler, and he kind of reflects his own religious feelings in it. And the song is actually very pro-Christianity, despite the fact that these people were labeled as Satanists. But they're not Satanists. But having said that, these lyrics actually almost come off as atheistic. I am not sure if that was the intention. It may not have been. I am guessing these lyrics were also written by Geezer. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure you will. But let's just listen to this for a second. Well, I don't want no Jesus freak to tell me what it's all about. No black magician telling me to cast my soul out. Don't believe in violence. I don't even believe in peace. I've opened the door, now my mind's been released. Well, I don't want no preacher telling me what God is in the sky. No, I don't want to tell me what I'm going to go or I'm going to die. I want to live my life. I want people telling me what to do. I just believe in myself because no one else is true. Okay? Kind of sounds contradictory to what we thought about Geezer, but I could be wrong. Anyways, that segment is very awesome. Then we have a little drum interlude in the middle, which doesn't get talked about a lot, but I think it's really awesome. Bill Ward was and still is a very talented drummer. Then we come to the next segment, which is the Everyday Comes and Goes segment. And this is where things really start picking up a bit. And again, it gets more upbeat, less dark, but still very heavy, which I love. But then we go back to that previous segment where I recited the lyrics to, and we have that going for almost the entirety of the rest of the song. But then we finish up with a slower segment. This is the big epic conclusion. I guess it's the coda of the song, and it really gives the song some much needed closure, and I think it closes out very well. So yeah, we have kind of a prog metal number here, and a lot of people probably don't think Black Sabbath really touched that genre too much. It was more like the kind of thing that Rush would do, but it works very well here. And I think Under the Sun / Everyday Comes and Goes is a great Black Sabbath song. I do know that they played this during their reunion in the early 2010s or so, and I think that's really awesome. This is another song that really falls through the cracks and doesn't get talked about enough, but I think it definitely is worth a listen, and I think it really is Black Sabbath at their very best, or close to their very best, if not. Okay. Now, again, this was a very interesting time period for the band, because like I said, they did delve a lot into cocaine, as I've said many times, but also they were attacked by a crazed Christian allegedly at a concert one time. He tried to storm the stage and stab Tony Iommi to death, but fortunately he was tackled and restrained by the road crew, and I hope he went to prison. So yeah. But yeah, the cocaine definitely took a toll on the band, and they started drifting into paranoia over the possibility that they could get busted and shipped off to prison. Okay? I would just say stop doing coke then, but it's an addiction. It's kind of hard to fight that. So anyways, that is the end of tonight's album rant review and the end of Black Sabbath Volume 4. Now, of course, I'm going to give my seal of approval on this in a second, but once again, I absolutely do recommend this album. This is one of their very best ones. It is from the early 70s, and this is when Black Sabbath was at their peak. And yes, you obviously do need to pick this one up. A lot of people would probably gravitate more towards Paranoid, and that's understandable because it includes many of their biggest hits, but don't let this fall through the cracks. Definitely listen to it. So anyways, thank you all very much for joining me tonight. I had a great time reviewing Black Sabbath Volume 4. Next time, I promise to bring you something very biblical, but until then, have a very pleasant evening.